I either have or will cover other parts of this franchise, and this video either is or will be linked below. I'm not going to restate here what I did or will say in the other video. These videos get long enough as it is. Put off by how long this video is, don't worry, I try to jam-pack my videos with as much content and as much detail as I possibly can. Anything I feel I can comment on and that I feel you might be interested in, I pretty much put in the video. I try not to repeat myself and talk fairly fast. Deus Ex 1 video game review, starting with plot. Every time someone mentions it, someone will reinstall it. Deus Ex takes place in 2052, and basically society is on a slow spiral into chaos, with a massive division between the rich and the poor, not only socially, but in some cities physically. A lethal pandemic known as the Grey Death ravages the world's population, especially within the United States, and has no cure. A synthetic vaccine, Ambrosia, the first of many, many references to various, in that case it's to Greek mythology, but yeah, many references. Manufactured by the company VersaLife, nullifies the effects of the virus, but is in critically short supply. With no hope for the common people of the world, riots occur worldwide, and a number of terrorist organizations have formed, among them the National Secessionist Forces, or the NSF, of the US, and a French group known as Silhouette, and at the very start you are fighting the NSF. In order to combat these threats to the world order, the United Nations has expanded its influence around the globe to form the United Nations Anti-Terrorist Coalition, UNATCO. Forget your cracks about the minuscule action taken by the UN. Now, if a country's leader behaves in an unacceptable manner, it's not a sternly worded letter they're sending out. No, it's cybernetically enhanced, top-trained agents, wielding flamethrowers and plasma weapons, who can, at will, detonate explosives fired at them before they're close enough to do damage, who can turn invisible and run at superhuman speeds, who can see body heat through walls, who can spy on enemies using a small drone that they control with their brain-implanted computer, and which they can blow up as an EMP attack. It is headquartered near New York City in a bunker beneath Liberty Island, placed there after a terrorist strike on the Statue of Liberty. And you're playing as J.C. Denton, the lead weapon against a group of anarchist terrorists that are trying to overthrow the UN regime. Now, something I really appreciate, as complicated as the overall plot gets, with conspiracies, alliances, and secret plans, the core focus remains the same for the entire game, which really helps you follow it, even if you feel like it's getting too involved. At the end of the day, the conflict that you're there to solve is the Grey Death. When you get new information, it flashes a futuristically designed floppy disk, because we'd still be using those in 2052, but futuristic ones. Characters will sometimes repeat what you already know, objective and plot stuff, with no change, which can really get annoying in a couple of places. And near the end, every major character you're currently involved with will talk one after another, and it becomes annoying to listen to. And at points you'll constantly hear from at least one ally. They easily could have cut out some of that. You know, you'll walk for a minute or less and he has new information for you. A lot of it is interesting, but it gets annoying. And you'll work with other organizations over the course of the game, and you'd better get used to each new leader you meet saying some version of "we have mutual interests," or JC saying that to him. And briefly on other, recent stuff, now that the first Black Panther trailer teaser is out, just to briefly comment, it looks amazing. All the design work and what we see of the world look incredible. And rest in peace, IO Interactive, one of my favorite video game developers for Hitman and Kane and Lynch. Yes, to an extent, even the second one. On plot. Do I have nostalgia? Yes. I will try to keep it in check and be honest about the lesser elements. Is this one of the best games of all time, regardless of genre, system, release year? In a lot of ways, yes. Perfect in a lot of the most important aspects, very nearly. But it is a fact that since it's so ambitious, there's a lot of stuff was learned as they were going. That does lead to some decisions that could have come out better, and these have been done better since, learning from mistakes. And if you're not into conspiracy theories, the game's story, won't be as much for you, but you could say something like that about every major piece of creative expression ever. There's, at the end of the day, the game was made for people who get really into conspiracy theories. Now, what you could argue that the conspiracy theories, some of them being very far-fetched, hurt the social commentary, which in contrast is entirely credible. Lots of characters wear dark shades, long leather jackets. It has the Matrix kind of appearance, not overall. There's no big slow-mo and martial arts and such, but the look of many characters, and also some areas. There are some places that, yeah, but in a lot of ways it's more futuristic, or it's slightly more futuristic. Now, characters. You play as J.C. Denton. He is a stone-cold badass. He communicates frequently, and not only through the pain grunts of quite a few FPS protagonists. However, those are the only place he expresses emotion. He has so many awesome, quippy, infinitely quotable, clever, sarcastic, deadpan one-liners, and lines in general. And, the training, which is entirely optional, that you can do, before you start the game. I think you can do it basically anytime like with Half-Life, it's independent of the rest of the story. But it does take place before the rest of the story, and that's made entirely clear. But yeah, it literally, the doctor who works directly with you between missions says, you don't know how to smile even for a picture. But yeah. Now, some people don't like that he's, one reviewer, facetiously said, he's basically Joe Friday, just the facts, man. Personally, I absolutely love that's how they... There's... Yeah, just to briefly quote, there's this character that you meet a number of times, and in a lot of ways, he's similar to you. And one of the times that you meet, he starts basically monologuing, and he's like, everywhere you turn, I'm right there, like a hall of mirrors. To which JC just deadpans, that makes me one ugly son of... Yeah. It's just... And he's like that so much. There are so many times where people will say something extremely serious, and so, you know, there's also there's this part where he... I forget if it's the bartender or one of the patrons, but he's in a bar. There are a lot of bars and clubs and such in this game, and he basically, you know, he's trying to make conversation. He's trying to not look too obviously like a government agent, because that makes a lot of people clam up. And he goes up and just asks, how's the beer here, or something like that. And the response is, it's fine if you like rat piss. To which JC just responds, never tried it. And one of the characters who are like on the overall team, you mostly, occasionally, you'll have some backup. You'll be working with at least one other agent or such. But mostly it's, you know, you're going on these missions, and you'll be contacted along the way by, you know, yeah, I shouldn't say exact, just some characters will contact you along the way, and one of them is the hacker Alex Jacobson. Alex Jacobson is the real person. He's based his... yeah. And he's a computer genius, and he watches what you do, giving info, because, like I already mentioned, you have a computer in your brain, so he can see everything you do, and he's not the only one. And that actually, there are a few times where that, like, just... you know, if you have a computer in your head and other people can access it from afar, maybe someone will be able to watch who you didn't want watch. And like, there are a couple of times where he'll comment if you make a really harsh choice. There are a ton of choices you can make in this game. Very early on, you can choose... there's a hostage situation, and you're sent to basically, you know, to rescue everyone and to take out the hostage takers, and whether that means killing them or just rendering them unconscious is up to you. However, they set up explosives, and if you want, you can just trigger the explosives, and that'll kill the hostage takers, but also the hostages. And Alex will be like, I can't believe you just did that. But you don't lose the game. You don't have to do it over. If that's the choice you want to make, it might punish you, but you're allowed to play on. And sometimes cyborgs and such will like sigh and just, you know, sound very human. It's super creepy. Now, others have already criticized the acting, the voice acting, and it has that thing where on some lines it really seems like the actor didn't understand, you know, what either parts or sometimes the entirety of the line even meant, and that's always awkward. And it sucks for, like, I mean, I've mostly seen it in video games, but it's also in animated stuff, you know, especially ones where they have a ton of lines and they maybe didn't have time to re-record every line that didn't. So, you know, in big games or in like animated TV series and such, and just every so often you'll pick up on like, oh wow, that was an awkward read. And there are a few child characters, which is probably a good thing that there are only a few, because the acting is abysmal. I don't know if they actually hired child actors who are often not good actors. You know, that's... and which sucks. But or if it's adults who are having trouble doing both a child's voice, impersonation, and and acting at the same time. But conversations freeze gameplay, but they can be started during combat since they're frequently triggered by your proximity to a character who will talk with you. The second mission, I'm freeing hostages, and on one of the attempts, I engage in combat and then run, not intending to avoid combat, but maybe I forget the exact. It's been a little while. It's been 2 weeks by now, but basically, I was probably either trying to lure at least one of the guys away from the rest of the guys, or something. Or maybe I went in for one attack and then tried to hide, maybe to sneak over to another. Anyway, it's part of my strategy, and because I run, I end up close to a hostage and accidentally trigger the conversation. The idea being that I approached the hostages before being seen, but they should have made it so that these conversations were optional, not automatic. If the player uses the person, just tell us that the character might talk to us. Have the character saying, "Hello, mister," or "Psst," or something. And later in mission 2, I'm sneaking, trying to sneak close to another hostage, but before I get there, the conversation starts, and here I'm attacked. And like I said, the gameplay is frozen during the conversation, but that just means that the enemy is going to stand there waiting for the conversation to end and then attack, which in fact actually means if you're seen early in the conversation and the conversation goes on for maybe a minute, not only will that one enemy be there who spotted you, no, a bunch of other ones will come running as well. And sometimes skipping through a conversation can help you avoid violence immediately after, but you really shouldn't have to. And there's also a very early mission where I can get all enemies to surrender if I reach the leader. And no matter what happens, when I do reach the leader, he'll surrender, and every enemy left alive and conscious will surrender with him. That's, of course, unless I don't skip at all. Then there'll be an enemy behind me when the conversation's over. He'll shoot immediately, and then the leader and everyone else does attack. I'm not asking they program it so that the enemy doesn't attack. I'm asking the conversations can't be immediately followed by violence. Make the characters always out of view of other characters, since really that's the problem. It's that you're seen. They don't hear conversations. If you jump in place and you're not seen, they'll hear that if they're close enough, but they don't hear characters talking. So if just, yeah, it's one of these things. That's one of the things that are really important. Another is something like when you cross between two zones that need to load, it's best to not have an enemy right on the other side, and that this game does do really well on. I've played this a lot of times. I'm not sure I've ever in this game run from one zone to another and have a person on the other zone immediately spot me and then attack me, because it's impossible for you to be ready for that. It just got done loading, and yeah. Now, in one mission, the guy that flies the black helicopter, of course, that takes me takes me from place to place, he tells me that I have to make it quick because there's going to be a lot of gunfire, which is true. There are a ton of guys around. And then I run to him, and when I reach him, I stand outside of it, and we talk for minutes. Just have the character enter first, and, preferably they talk on the flight, but no, that never happens. there are a lot of these, brief cutscenes where you see the vehicle move. It's not always a helicopter, but yeah, move from where you ended the level and just basically out of that area. And yes, they're often too short to have a conversation, but just a game like Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast, there are conversations that they have while moving from one place to another via a spaceship of some kind. And what they do there is just show a vague background behind them and have that be, it helps there because they're in space, but just, not always. It helps that means that they can have the full conversation, and then when the conversation's over, then they reach their destination, and that would have been fine here. And it's not actually a problem all that often, but it definitely would have helped a lot in that one situation. And it feels like they wrote and recorded the line of like, oh, you better hurry, and planned that there would be a bunch of enemies there to attack you, that they did that, maybe way later after having recorded the brief conversation between the two of you, and done that as an in-engine cutscene outside of the helicopter, with your character. I guess that's why the pilot is so eager to talk. He's not on the outside. And cutscenes sometimes will have a vehicle, boat, helicopter, etc. move, and it always looks kind of weightless, fake, and awkward. And dance moves are infrequent, which is good because they're hilarious. Spinning 360 degrees, marching in place while swinging your lower arms, or the like. And TV news voice and speech sounds like Peanuts adults. This is probably because they're not like cutscenes. You can walk up to a TV and they'll be saying something, but then you can walk away and walk back up to it and nothing will, so they didn't want it to just be saying, I guess, I don't know, it wouldn't really have been a problem because there are other conversations that you overhear, but yeah. And at least one character has killer abs, but the fact that it's just a texture is completely obvious. And there are a number of conversations where you decide what to say, and in some instances a chat may end in the other person helping you or attacking you. And every cutscene is scripted and in-engine, no FMVs, no CGI. And it doesn't allow for much articulation in the animation as more recent games, but it's not bad, and there are some really golden moments in the lighting. Length. Now, I played stealthy, hacking, try to explore and get as much stuff as I can, and I've played it a number of times. I'd say at least half a dozen, maybe more, all the way through, and thus I know where to go, what to do. Otherwise, it would take at least a third longer to complete. And I have gone violent instead of stealthy on at least one playthrough, which I enjoyed as well, and I have tried out every single augmentation at least once. Not every single combination of augmentations, that would, yeah, but, of all of the augmentations, I have tried out every single one of them on at least one playthrough. Yeah. And yeah, this took me 54 hours to complete this time. And I don't have any other time of it recorded. Now, my times for the other Deus Ex games I've played, each exploring and trying to do everything, but each only once. Deus Ex Invisible War lasted me 30.5 hours, so significantly less. Deus Ex Human Revolution lasted me 69 hours. Missing Link lasted me 11.5 hours. And yeah, 69 hours. And with Missing Link, 80.5. I could imagine the first playthrough of Deus Ex, the first game, probably took me around that amount of time. And, make sure you see all 3 endings, smartly written, distinct, interesting, all worth seeing. And thankfully, the developers allow you to get all 3 without having to play through the entire game more than once. They're not affected by how you've played up to that point, unlike say, Human Revolution, Dishonored 1. There, the ending you get is based on how much violence you used. Bioshock 1, 2, Dark Forces 2, Jedi Knight, it's based on whether you rescued or harmed innocents. Near the very end, the game will tell you the 3 different ways to complete the game, and the final area has the means required for all 3 endings. You can't accidentally do more than one ending, or do one you didn't mean to. The game makes it completely clear, and these are active decisions. Now, some people say they just couldn't get into it. They tried for a number of hours. Personally, I got into it right away back when I first played it, back when it first came out. The game is not for everyone, and I hope I go into enough detail to give you an idea of whether or not it's for you. And, like other great RPG games, if you make permanent decisions that you later regret, it may be best to just cut your losses and start back over. Which, yeah, to me, that's the way you're supposed to do it. If, the more the decisions... I mean, it sucks if the game doesn't give you a good enough idea of it. And I would definitely say whenever there's like a skill upgrade or an augmentation decision, I don't think it should be considered wrong to just save your game before you unlock or upgrade or whatever. Then once you've done the one you think you want, play for a few minutes and do the thing that you've just upgraded so you can see how much better you're doing it or the like. And then if you legitimately don't feel like that's the one that you want, load your game and make a different choice or hold off on making the choice or something. But yeah, that is something. I do think that it would be fine if there was like training wheels for stuff like that in RPG games where it just gave you, 30 seconds of a test run, maybe more than that, but a few minutes of a test run of a new thing before you made your permanent decision to use or not use that thing. But yeah, ultimately, if you're role-playing, you are making permanent choices. It's where's the fun in just redoing a thing without... Yeah. Moving on to demo. I know it's shallow, but there's something I love about the demos for this game. When this was new, there were 2 demos. One was the first mission, the second was the second mission. If you install both, when you start up the second mission, you can carry over what you did in the first mission. And then when I got the game, it allowed me to play on from the end of the second mission after that demo. I love that. There are 2 big things that score huge points for me with demos. When a demo does basically what I just said, or at least or if it just takes an actual finished level from the game, which is very representative of the full game, and let you play that, or when the demo has something that isn't in the full game at all, and couldn't be in the full game at all, and it just, again, it's really representative. It lets you have fun, it lets you try out the things that, you know, the demo for Jedi Knight to Jedi Outcast is a... I really hope that bothering people when I'm saying Outcast instead of Outcast. The level isn't from the actual game, and if they had taken the level from the actual game, it would probably have been really spoilery. If they, you know, basically in the demo you get to use a bunch of these force powers, which is a huge draw of the game, and in the game itself, when you start to get a lot of the force powers and get them to high levels, you know, that's relatively late into the game, and if you played one of those levels before playing the start of the game, it would actually kind of spoil some of the major plot points. And it's also just the demo is entirely self-contained, and you know, the same is true of the Half-Life 1 demo. You know, there's no place in the actual game that this demo could be put and it would make any sense. Not at all. But it shows you, you know, you get to be in some of the situations that are in the final game. It's almost like a, you know, they fast forwarded some of the in-between parts, and so, you know, yeah, you fight head crabs, you fight soldiers, you know, there are scripted events and such, and yeah, I suppose that's all I should say for that. It runs for me. I use the Deus Ex thing from, I don't know how to pronounce this, but Kentie.net, you know, KENTIE.net. And I know that some can't get it to work on versions gotten today. I haven't tried those. I run it from my original disc, not Game of the Year version, but yeah, I got this disc version when it was new, and yeah, if you don't have a disc version from back then, you know, if you try to use a version that was, you know, patched in later or something, you might have trouble, and my sympathies. You know, yeah, some of these reviews, I'll admit, they're basically more for people who've already played the game to go like, oh yeah, I remember that, that was cool, or such, you know. Yeah, a number of these games I review are, you know, from a while back, from the 90s or early 2000s. Now, I've seen some reviews where people criticize the game for having bugs. It really didn't, particularly when it came out. Yes, some people do have problems with it working today. I just don't think you should put that on the game itself. I do think that it would be great if they made like a new version, just updated the graphics, leaving everything else intact, so that it would run smoothly on new machines. I mean, before I downloaded the Deus Ex, yeah, the game would not have run on my more, you know, new machine. You know, I've gotten new computers since, new main computers since originally playing it. You know, it ran with no problem back when I got it, because that was on a computer that was from, you know, the early 2000s. Excuse me. Critics. Now, some reviewers and players complain about the size of the save files. You know, yeah, one reviewer noted that playing through the entire game, he accumulated over 250 megabytes of save game data, with the average file coming in at over 15 megabytes. And That's true. Some ding dingus put a high quality screenshot on each. I'm not sure if you can disable that. I haven't found a way. I get the logic. That way you know the details of where, when, and such of each file. But it was a bad way to solve it. Maybe each should come with a short description, changes, decisions recently made, something, in text. It's not a problem today because we have much larger hard drives, but when the game came out, we did have a lot less hard drive space, and yeah, that was legitimate, that was a problem, and yeah, I'm not going to make any excuses for that. Now, yeah, to briefly quote directly from a negative review, this individual gave it a 2 out of 5 and called it bland as the headline. The control isn't smooth, weapon control is poor, it feels like the weapons were cardboard cutouts, not a graphics issue, but a feel issue. Characters were lifeless. And yeah, and I mean, basically that's, to an extent true, and that again, it's a problem in a lot of these first-person shooter RPG hybrids, that just the weapon stuff, the animations and the designs and such just aren't as compelling as first-person shooters that came out around the same time, and certainly not as have come out since. And yeah, I just, at the end of the day, I personally don't consider it a big problem. It's just something you get used to. Just maybe full RPG games, are less awkward. I've almost only really played hybrids of RPGs and first-person shooters because I love first-person shooters, and I do want the kind of role-playing stuff, but not. I've tried a few full RPG games, and mostly they're just too involved, and at the end of the day, sometimes I'm a man of simple tastes. I just want to be able to draw a weapon, aim, and shoot. And if it's much more complicated than that to use a weapon normally, it's probably just, a big part of it is just when I play a video game, I want to forget the world around me, and games that have like a ton of little stat, notifications, and like a lot of, a lot of effort has to be put into just using a weapon. It's going to remind me that, this is a video game. Now, let's see. Yeah, one person pointed out that the endings here are not, they don't consist entirely of stock footage with a vague monologue laid over, like Deus Ex Human Revolution. It's almost Dishonored. Bioshock 1 and 2 aren't much better, and yeah, here they're very different, and what happens after, what happens in the cutscene of the individual ending, the staging, the tone, the whole thing, hugely different. Now, another quote, and this person actually did give it a 10 out of 10. The learning curve is somewhat steep, and the first level is one of the hardest in the game. And that's kind of true. You kind of have to just try out different things and figure out what will actually work well. The game doesn't directly tell you you could compare it somewhat to the first Thief game. Both games you can, approach somewhat like the way you approach the first level of Thief, but in Thief, in the training mission and just, yeah, also some in the first level, you do get a good idea of how to approach it, where in this game, one thing is that it can be kind of difficult, especially in that first level, to separate the different enemies so that you can take them out, unless you just go in guns blazing, which is really difficult at that point. Guns blazing is a difficult way to play this game in general, but it's especially difficult in that first level, and add to that the fact that the patrol paths and such, some of the enemies are even legitimately do refuse to split up. Sometimes you will see two enemies, and if you don't take out both of them extremely quickly, then one of them will notice that you attacked the other one, and you'll be attacked, which you don't have a lot of protection from enemies in that first level. And yeah, the training level helps. It definitely does do a lot to teach you sneaking, but it's still, it's difficult. And this one person, this is still a review of this game of Deus Ex 1. Many will act like BioShock has a masterful story, even though it's essentially Doom but underwater and with dialogue, or more like a monologue. I think I kind of love that way to describe it. The targeting system is very clunky and caused me to despise the game when I first attempted it. This is responsible for most of the negative reviews. I'm not sure I'd say most, but yeah. In its defense, the idea is that you just finished training. Of course you're not an expert at these weapons yet, but yeah, basically this game came out before focus aiming was a thing. And back then, basically, if you're firing an automatic weapon, late 90s shooters, if you're firing an automatic weapon, if you fire in small bursts and you're standing still, and maybe especially if you crouch, you'll have an easier time of hitting. Your shots will be more accurate. And that's true here, but in addition to that, there's this targeting reticle that shrinks gradually as long as you're standing still, indicating that your projectile will be more accurate. And yeah, if you move, it'll start over, and you can do a couple of things to improve that process. But at the very start, you're basically, if you want to use projectile weapons at the very start of the game, if you want to use ranged weaponry at the very start of the game, yes, it's going to take several seconds with you standing still of you aiming, and if the person is moving, if even for a second or a fraction of a second the reticle stops being on the target, it's going to start over, especially early on. And that, yeah, that is really, really annoying. And again, this is something that would take me completely out of it if it wasn't something that you could deal with. Personally, I try not to use ranged weapons for the first couple of missions, so that by the time I start actually going around shooting, I will have upgraded stuff so that the reticle very quickly focuses. But yeah, by comparison, the third game has focus aiming and is way smoother in that regard. And yeah, others call it a very frustrating and slow aiming system. Yeah, so this gave it a 6 out of 10. The game is very hard, especially if you're new to this kind of game that gives you many options. You have to know what you want to specialize in, otherwise you get your ass handed to you every time. That is very true. There are a lot of different skills and augmentations, and you have the weapon modifications and such, and if you don't if you focus on the wrong thing, or if you try to make your character kind of be able to do a bunch of different things well, yeah, that's going to be very difficult to play through, and it didn't have to be. You should be able to do a bunch of different, to make your character. I rarely say positive things about Evolva, which has a very clever idea, but ultimately there are some huge problems with that game. Yeah, already done a video on it. At least one video. I forget if there's more than one. One thing that is true of that isn't true of Deus Ex is you can choose to specialize. In that it helps you have 4 characters, not only one, but you can choose. Personally, I tend to make all 4 of them gradually good at all of the different things rather than specialized. But yeah, especially considering that a few levels you actually start out with them in different places and they have to meet up, and then if at least one of them, for example, can't run fast, can't jump high, you might not be able to get him. But overall, ultimately, it is doable to focus. You certainly don't have to have it completely even the way I do. You can specialize it more, and you can still play the game. And in this game, if you're just trying to specialize in, like, there are a lot of different abilities that all sound good. If you try to upgrade all of them slowly, then none of them will get very high by the end of the game, and you'll be running around, without these abilities coming together and making you especially effective. And I'm gonna bring up Splinter Cell Blacklist several more times. It's probably really annoying to the viewers because I do, but it is kind of, it's probably the best example of this kind of a couple of different ways to play that I've played. A couple of different ways to play it, and you can kind of mix it up. If you're playing, if you don't really care about earning points and you just want to run around and have fun, do whatever you can, yeah, you go ahead, bring a grenade and then have some, silent kind of stuff. Bring, put some armor and some, on your person, and start out by blowing something up, and then wait for things to calm down, and then start ghosting, or start ghosting and then end it by blowing something up. You can do that. The game doesn't really punish you for that. It's just not going to reward you. It rewards you for playing focused, and the harder the play style you use, the more it's going to reward you. But as long as you at some point earn a lot of points and then use that money right, and really it's not that difficult to do really well at it once you've, maybe for a little while you'll be trying to figure out, wait, what should I do here? But if you play this game and you make the wrong decisions, you're stuck. You might have to start all the way over. If you play Blacklist and you make some wrong decisions, you spend your money on the wrong weapons, just grind a little. It's annoying, but you can't in this. There is no grinding for, no matter what. And yeah, to return to the same reviewer, I hate the lack of a shop too. Somewhere I could offload the junk I pick up to buy some new stuff would be great. And yeah, it's very true that this would benefit from proper shop kind of, yeah, there's an actual, for comparison, System Shock 2 and the Septerra Core. These are games that, Septerra Core really is a full-on RPG. These are games with at least RPG elements that do have stores. There are a ton of stores throughout, especially System Shock 2. Well, yeah, also Septerra Core. Basically, in Septerra Core, it's more that you'll be going back to the same shop a bunch of time, the same shops. But yeah, in both of them, you can sell the stuff that you find that you can't use yourself, and you can buy more of stuff. The inability to really go out and buy ammo in this game really does affect which weapons you end up using. Now, I'm not going to get too much into this, but people who don't like this game, you're allowed not to think highly of it, but don't say it's loved purely because of nostalgia. There are tons of things about the game that were great when it came out and are great today. And some of them have been done better, but just if I played this game for the first time today, I would still love it. And I loved it when it first came out, even though there are, even back then, aspects of it had been done better, were being done better in other games. In a lot of ways, the first Half-Life game is a better game than this, without a doubt, and it came out 2 or 3 years before this, so easily. I mean, the first Half-Life game really is a tremendous first-person shooter. I'm not breaking any new ground by pointing that out, but yeah, videos on that are coming up. You can give it a negative review and admit that it's just not for you, for example. And not saying, some people went into this and didn't like it, even though it seemed like it's completely their thing, but just, yeah, and there are some issues trying to run the game today, and it's fair to bring those up, but don't review the whole game as if it was always true. Whenever you go back to something that isn't recent, you have to accept that there will be elements that are different from what's expected from recent releases. Games, movies, comics, everything. You yourself have to make some of the trip to where it's viewed fairly for when it came out. And this is especially if you're going to review it online, reviews that other people are going to read. There are things that I don't think highly of, where I know that I'm not really, it was never really going to be for me, and I tend not to review those. Now, yeah, this one critical reviewer does say that, the choice of character development is too skewed in the stealth pistol lockpick build's favor. You can try to build a tank of a character that shoots all that moves with rockets and lambs, but you will quickly find yourself out of ammo and stuck in unwinnable situations unless you take up arms in a different category. And Yeah, and ammo acquisitions. Yeah, he points out weapons tend to be unbalanced. Ammo acquisition makes or breaks most weapons, which means the handgun and assault rifles should be king. However, the assault rifle is a burst fire hog that is just plain inefficient compared to a single headshot from a pistol or a swipe. And I'm not sure I should go into, yeah, but the what he's saying you should swipe with, but that is unfortunately very true. And there are some missions where it's really useful to have an assault rifle or a shotgun because a lot of enemies carry it, so every so often you'll be able to stock back up on ammo. But then if you do use these weapons on missions that don't have a lot of enemies that use it or stockpiles of ammo for it, you'll suddenly be completely out of ammo, and you kind of want to try to stick to the weapons that you've found once you start modifying them, which is very early. You really don't want to get rid of something that you've spent a while modifying, and you've maybe even you've put skill points into that ability, and suddenly well, I mean, I can't use this weapon, and yeah, that's really annoying. If they were going to do that, I'm not saying that you should be able to remove weapon modifications and have the things back so you could use them to modify other weapons. I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying that if there are going to be parts of the game where it's really useful to run around with this particular weapon, and other parts where it's really useful to run around with this other particular weapon, they should maybe give you more space to carry these weapons, or yeah, just something. I mean, in System Shock 2, there are different parts of the game where different weapons are really useful, and I tend to end up running around with a number of different weapons. In this, I'm not running around with very many because most of them take up several boxes of your inventory, so I tend to just run around with the ones that take up a single box, and then for a while I'll be running around with something that takes up several, but just it's not. Yeah, and in System Shock 2, it's not really, that isn't a problem. They applied they knew that, okay, in some parts of the game you're going to want to do this, you're going to want to use this weapon, in other parts you're going to want to use this other weapon, and so the amount of space, if you wanted, hypothetically, you could carry every single weapon in System Shock 2 at the same time. I'm pretty sure there's just enough space for that. However, then you wouldn't be able to carry much of anything else, and there are a lot of other things that you'll also want to carry. So you'll want to be very selective about which weapons you keep, but you are keeping several. And yeah, on ammo, System Shock 2 enables you to buy ammo in addition to finding it, which helps substantially to combat this exact problem of, ammo making or breaking weapons. And that game came out before this one. That game doesn't support stealth to the same extent. They could have gone the Cybermarks route, where you choose how much ammo to buy and bring with you, but it takes up space and weight and costs money. It took half the game before I had full ammo for the sniper, a gun which I can get at the start of the first mission, and which I didn't use at all. So, and even then, it's only 96 rounds. Comparatively, the pistol, which I tend to turn into a sniper, carries 150 rounds. And I ran around most of the game with pretty much 150, because for a lot of the game, the ammo is really common, and then there are some missions where it's not, and for those, I just don't use it as much. There I tend to focus on melee. you know, I probably could have gotten full ammo a little sooner. I think there are some places where you could buy it, and I didn't buy it because I don't tend to use the sniper. Also, why does it take so long to stockpile flare darts? They're just flares that you can shoot. You might think they incinerate enemies, but no. I couldn't find 60, the max carry capacity of them over the course of the game, picking up all I found and using none of them. That's absurd. And you don't even start to get flare darts until a little while into the game. While you actually get the dart, the crossbow for the darts in the first, at the very start of the game. So yeah, it's just I don't even know why it's treated as such a it's as rare as the I I want to say sabot shells for the shotgun, which help you destroy robots with the shotgun, where otherwise you'd need rockets and other explosives, and the the grenade, launcher for the assault rifle. Those are rare, and so are the flare darts. Why? The flare darts are barely, I don't know, maybe I've missed something, but they're not that useful, and it's not like that much of the game has you running around. Mostly you can just use your flashlight, which you start the game with. Yes, that uses electricity, but other than that, it's real easy to find regular flares. Now, but you do spend a lot of the game in darkness, and sometimes in like almost labyrinth kind of dark passages. Now, you can sometimes buy ammo and other stuff in this, but rarely, and for some reason they'll tell you what and how much money they want, but not the amount of ammo. Sometimes they ask for a lot of money for very little, other times vice versa. And save scumming is the only way to completely avoid wasting money, or using walkthroughs, of course. And there's no good reason for this being the case. I'm sorry, when I go out and buy something in the real world, yeah, we'll definitely agree on the price, but we tend to also agree on the amount. It's not there's no reason for the game not. Yeah. And yeah, and he points out that the lambs are situational, and the lambs and the heavy weapons, it doesn't make a lot of sense to invest in the skill for it, although the demolition skill for the lambs and such, which I will define in a little bit, they actually, you get better at disarming them if you upgrade at least one level in demolitions. And yeah, I tend to do that because you will have to disarm, and there are a lot to disarm in that first level, so it's one of the first things I upgrade. Now, yeah, a game that you can play that allows you to ghost, stealth kill everyone, or loudly gun everyone down, blow up everyone, is Splinter Cell Blacklist. And before you say, but heavy requires better armor and more expensive weapons, first, if you only play it through once, you are losing a great experience. Second, if you must only play through the story once and want to be able to use big guns from the start of that, grind the non-story levels. Yes, it'd be nice if you didn't have to, but again, don't play it only once, and accept that early levels are tough if you choose to go all loud and violent right from the start. You could say that it asks you to do stealth before you go loud, but, comparing the two, yes, this one really does limit heavy weapons use and such, and, Unlike Blacklist, this one doesn't let you go back and replay parts with new equipment and weapons. I'm not saying that I would want to, not in the same, playthrough, but yeah, they really could have made it so that you could go through this game, blowing up and such. And I mean, hypothetically, if okay, they definitely want you to, they want to discourage you from just running around gunning everything, blowing everything up and such. How about if you do that, you'll get a reputation for being really violent and dangerous, and NPCs who would otherwise help you will be, won't help you anymore. That happens if you, yeah, that actually does happen. If you just do really violent stuff near them, they might freak out and not want to help you. Yeah, that would be a way to do it. And just, yeah, as it is, it feels like the game is really more, it wants you to choose a specific approach when the game actually seems like it allows. The very first mission, one of the first things that happen is that you are offered a choice of, do you want a sniper rifle to take enemies out on, at great range, which, again, since the, it's one thing that the moment, when you focus the reticule, it'll slowly shrink. Another thing is, if you try to use a scope in the first level, it's going to go kind of, you can't ask him to take a deep breath. So, yeah, points taken from interactive games. But yeah, you're offered a sniper rifle. I think the second, yeah, the second thing must be the crossbow, which fires darts, because that's the one I picked. But and then the third is the rocket launcher. So it's telling you these are some of your options. The very first thing the game supposedly tells you is, if you want to go around blowing up robots, that's fine. That's an approach. And when you actually try, it turns out that that's actually not all that. Yeah, it's a lot harder to make that work. Where, again, Blacklist, yeah, if you want to blow stuff up, I mean, you'll need expensive stuff for it. It's at the very start of the game. It is easier to ghost because your weapons are not as powerful or as good at greater ranges. And yes, you're also, later on you'll get better, armor that enables you to hide better, but at the very start of the game, you can ghost, you can avoid contact with enemies almost entirely. And this is, of course, this is harder the higher difficulty setting you choose, but don't go into the game and then say, oh, it's too difficult, if you chose a high difficulty setting. If you choose the lowest difficulty setting, and yeah, start out ghosting. Don't go into it trying to blow everyone up before you have good armor, before you have good grenades. And again, if you try that, you'll just see that it doesn't work. And what you should take from that isn't, oh, well, the game's not for me. The game, or if you don't mind ghosting, at least, what you should take from it is, okay, I'll ghost for a while, then I'll buy stuff that'll enable me to, because this game, as well as that, have you running around with grenades that blow stuff up really well. EMP, you've got, really powerful rifles and explosive weapons. But in that game, you can run around and actually use them all the time. There are very few parts of Splinter Cell Blacklist where you can't go at it completely, whether you want to ghost, whether you want to stealthily kill everyone, or whether you want to blow everything up. Once you have the equipment and you personally know how the game works well enough to play it like that, you can play almost the entire game exactly like that. There are a few places where you're forced into one or more, where where at least one of them isn't doable, but it's very rare. I've played through the game several times, and I play through it each time I play through it 3 times. You know, first Ghost, then Panther, and then Assault. And yeah, there are very few parts of the game where I'm forced out of the play style that I'm using at that time. And this one reviewer says, which I think is unfortunately somewhat true, it's a very ugly game nowadays with no charm in its art style. And yeah, the main problem of the art style is it's going for realistic, and you know, yeah, that art style holds up the worst as time passes. And yeah, that's kind of true. It is, you know, even beyond like the graphics engine or such. Yeah, a lot of areas just don't look that interesting. Again, you know, compared to other games from its time, Half-Life still looks really compelling. You know, this, you know, you have all this military stuff, you have this, you know, kind of old parts of the of this big science building area, and then you have these new futuristic parts of the science area where, you know, you have these complicated machines and such. And yeah, again, you know, Half-Life 1 graphically of course doesn't look great today, but when you just look at the designs and such, yeah, and that is also a game that looks very realistic, or yeah, did back then. And that might be about it for this section. Now, you know, when you face laser grids, you can use multi-tools to turn them off, or simply carefully moving between them. Button the air a la Catherine Zeta-Jones. I'm being slightly facetious there. I, of course, mean you stack boxes to jump between them, and yeah. And let's see. Yeah, and this is also, Deus Ex 1 does not excel in every area. The game is like a baker wanted to create a perfect cake with all kinds of unique tastes, but failed to, you know, yeah, to become harmonized when the actual product came out. And similar to modern RPGs, NPCs have a life of their own by engaging in dialogue with one another and adjusting their scripted behavior to match your actions or dialogue choices. What you say and do will determine what aspects of the storyline develop or what areas of the map you can access. Even seemingly innocuous decisions can result in major narrative changes later on, and the game designers have anticipated every possible choice or action you could imagine. Try and see for yourself, there are enough variety in the storytelling. And Open game. This is an incredibly well done game with a multitude of possibilities and one of the greatest replay values I've ever witnessed in a game, since at any time during the game you have to say to yourself, I wonder what else could have happened back there. And yeah, you know, let's see. Deus Ex incorporates elements from 4 video game genres: role-playing, first-person shooter, adventure, and immersive simulation, the last of which being a game where nothing reminds you that you're just playing a game. And, you know, you have, similar to the Thief games, you have emergent gameplay. You know, physics simulation, yes, the physics, they're nowhere near as complex as more modern physics engines. You know, right with something like, I want to say it's the Havoc engine, seen as early as Max Payne 2, which is from 2003, so not that far off from this game, has far more realistic physics in, like, objects. You know, they have weight and, yeah, but there is still, it is still there, and you can actually use it. You know, where in Thief you can't stack objects, really. In this, you can pick up and move most objects, including some very large ones if you have the augmentations allowing for that. You know, yeah, simple compared to today, but it's consistent and went as far as it could. But yeah, you know, you can stack boxes and then jump on those boxes to get over something or up onto something. You can distract enemies with noise. You know, anything thrown will make noise proportional to the two surfaces colliding to some extent. The distance, how hard it was thrown or fell, or the like. Pick up and throw something flammable, say a garbage can or a wooden crate, onto a garbage can on fire, and they'll catch fire and burn. And throwing a different flammable object onto the one now on fire will make that one catch fire as well. You know, which the Thief games did not have. Well, yes, stacking objects you can somewhat. Sorry, what I meant is that you can't. You know, things don't really catch on fire in the Thief games. You can throw what you can turn out. You know, fires, but for what? You know, with water arrows you can extinguish fires, and if you personally touch fire, you know, if you go into a place where, like, if you go into a, what's it called, chimney kind of, you know, if you walk onto the fire there, you will take damage. But you can't make things catch on fire in that game, and in this you can. And ultimately, things catching on fire, it doesn't help especially, but it's there. It helps you, it helps make you feel like you're in a real world. And I mean, it's not like in Postal 2 where you can, like, almost direct the fire, you know, where you choose to pour out gasoline and then set that on fire so that, you know, you can make a line, you know, leading to an object catch fire or the like. You know, and can't, I'm not sure you can especially use it against enemies or such. Excuse me. You know, you can set them on fire, but that takes the flamethrower. But yeah. Now you know, the fire, yeah, the fire does not work on people or animals. You know, you can pick up a body of an enemy and throw it onto fire. That's not going to make him catch fire. You know, if you want to set a person or animal on fire, use the flamethrower. And you always take damage from fire. And you can pick up the fiery cans if you have the augmentation for it. Objects on fire register as too heavy. I forget if you can pick those up. I didn't use the strength one. And augmentation on this playthrough. But yeah, you know, if you're trying to pick something up that's on fire, it'll say too heavy to pick up rather than, you know, it's on fire, it'll burn my hands, you clod. But yeah, and bodies knocked out or dead can be picked up. You can even run and jump while carrying them. The first time you use a body, you check it for items, and if your hands are empty, the next time you'll pick up the body. You can't carry animal bodies, only search them, though they never have anything on them, so I'm not entirely sure why they, I don't know, did, in order for it to have, like, yeah, basically you can search anything that, any body that you find. That, anyway, I guess I should briefly say, you know, when you're told something is too heavy, for example, it'll write it at the top of the screen. And I know I said earlier that, you know, stuff like that would usually distract me. In this game, that's the computer in your brain, you know, stating this. So it is explained within the universe, same as in Cybermarks and System Shock 2. The reason you can get a graphical display of what you're carrying is because the computer in your brain has stored that knowledge. You know, in both Cybermarks, yeah, certainly both Cybermarks and System Shock 2, when you're seeing any kind of visual display of, like, data of yours, you are literally seeing something that your brain is... It's like when we imagine something and we see it for our mind's eye. That's basically what it's doing. When Cybermarks, it's kind of it comes up as like a hologram, really, for some of it. Anyway, yeah, if your hands are empty, I already read that. Robots don't leave bodies unless they're disabled, and then they're static and can't be searched. So I'm not sure why they... It seems like it would make more sense to search a robot. I mean, batteries or something might be... You might be able to... Ammo. You know, I mean, some of them use guns similar to yours, certainly. They make similar sounds when they fire, so you might think you could pick up ammo from them, but yeah. But, you know, yeah, sometimes you don't want to pick up a body since you didn't put it there. Maybe it'll be noticed if it's gone or something. I'm not entirely sure if it'll be noticed if it's gone. But again, even if not, I don't want to, you know, even if it's just me pretending that it would be noticed, I still don't want to move it. But, you know, if you have empty hands when you do it, then you'll pick it up. And I kind of feel like it's, you know, when you point to it, the bracket says dead body or unconscious body, all they had to do was add checked after the first use press, you know. If you don't pick up everything he has, you can't carry him. At least give us the option to pick it up, then immediately dump it in place. Maybe right-click, press for search, right-click, hold for pick up. You know, because picking the stuff up and then dumping it again, that's what you just do as the player manually. Why can't the game... I mean, I ended up just having things that take up space in the 10 inventory slots, the quick slots, just to, you know, be able to... Okay, this is going to take up a bunch of boxes in my inventory, so I'll, you know, quick inventory this, dump it, quick inventory this other thing, dump it, then check the body to pick up. Some of them carry, you know, an entire rocket launcher or something. Why do I have to make space for a rocket launcher, which I'm only going to dump right after anyway, just to be able to carry the body? Why can't it just say, you don't have space for this, and then it dumps it on the ground instead? Theoretically, okay, if a character, you know, let's say a character, although even when it's tiny, even if he's just carrying a knife, you can't carry him. But okay, hypothetically, you can only carry a body. You can't pick up a body if it's carrying something. Just pick it up and immediately dump it. There's, you know, I mean, it already manually places things in your inventory, in the boxes that are free, if you have space for it. And if you pick up ammo, it automatically adds it to the overall count. There it doesn't make you, comparatively, if you want to pick up ammo in System Shock 2, you have to manually click on it. It'll open a dialogue, it'll open a box for when you check a body, and you have to click on each individual thing you want to pick up. And for some of them, you'll have to, if the enemy had let's say a rifle, a shotgun, which has a little bit of ammo, you have to pick it up, then right-click it, then empty it. And again, I do think that in that game they could have just made it, just pick up the ammo without, just doing it quicker. Anyway, it could be more convenient, is what I'm saying. And yeah, if let's see, yeah, if you do have something in your hands, be it an item in your inventory or a crate you're carrying, then you won't be able to pick him up, and then you won't accidentally pick him up. And robots, turrets, and such will behave based on their programming, which you can hack and alter. The robots you can rarely affect, but the turrets and cameras all the time. And then they will seek out and attack any living, conscious enemies of yours. And they will do this based on where they are and what situation they're in, not carried out in a predetermined manner. There were a few places where enemies were just a little out of range of a turret, and I played decoy. I ran close enough to the enemy that they saw me, then ran away, leading them into the turret. So yeah. Now, you can go through this game destroying every single robot, or almost none of them at all, and certainly barely using your own ammo or weapons at all. But yeah, the game is the most open game, the most freedom in a game that I've ever experienced. Now, let's see. Now, on easier difficulties, all of the boss fights are way too easy, and it could easily have been redone to make them challenging. I'm not talking about non-violent solutions. There are to some of them. No, I'm talking about you actually using violent means. To be fair, you can make it harder on yourself, but you shouldn't have to. And I've only played Human Revolution once, and it was a few years ago by now. It was not long after it was new. As far as I remember, the boss fights in those are far more challenging than in this. And obviously in that you then have the issue, which is in a lot of stealth games, which technically is sort of also a problem here. I don't know, maybe that's the idea here. You can go through the entire game, almost immediately taking out a ton of enemies, because if you're not seen, if you get close enough, melee weapons can often very quickly take out enemies. And you also do have weapons that are really useful for taking out enemies, especially if they haven't already seen you, very, very quickly. And yeah, that goes for the boss fights too, but then why have boss fights? But it's every game that allows stealth rather than combat for dealing with enemies has the problem of bosses. And I've seen almost no games actually solve this properly. Hitman Contracts, the last level, you can, the game, not the mode of absolution, you can complete as stealthily as you've completed the levels up to. You can play through the entirety of Contracts completely, silent assassin rating on every single level. I absolutely love that about the game. And another game that actually does solve it is the Thief reboot, the fourth Thief game, just called Thief, from 2014. There are not many boss battles in that game, but every single boss battle that there is, you can stealth through. hugely appreciated. But yeah, this and Deus Ex 3 and I guess Deus Ex 2, I remember almost nothing about that game. Yeah, you know, suddenly you're having to fight even though you didn't really before. But again, yeah, I think I've gone into enough detail on this one. But yeah, in both games, the characters you fight are ones you have some kind of relationship with. Although, in the third one, you don't necessarily know that much about them. But yeah, but they don't tend to just. Oh, actually, I forget about the third one. But in this, they're not ones that just appear for the fight and only for the. A lot of video games have boss fights where it's just now this character is there and he's only there for the fight, and it's always more compelling when you actually have some kind of relationship to. Yeah, there's a few places where there's a basketball and a hoop, and you can play pool in a bar, although the physics for it are absolutely terrible. But I don't think they meant for you to really. It's just there are physics for it. And mirrors work, but are simple. It's not that far, from just Duke Nukem 3D, And there's a message log and a conversation log if you missed something, and you can actually add something to your inventory while carrying a body or crate, and you always have a real-time compass, making navigation easier. Moving on to skills. You can upgrade any skill, anytime, anywhere. The cost is the only limiting factor, unlike the augmentations. And it basically makes sense. You're using this currency, kind of, these skill points to program the computer in your brain. So, yeah, similar to how the physical augmentation, the augmentations in the third game are basically things that your body can do, but they're like upgrades of some kind, so they're not something you could do before, because it basically makes sense. Now, there are 4 levels total to each skill, and maybe there should be more, and costing less, of course, to even it out, making it more of a gradual increase, because as it is, there are some abilities that you can completely upgrade very quickly, or that you can at least get very high very quickly. And yeah, it's not the more levels the better, but it definitely did not. There's no way that at least a little more, maybe 6 or 8 or something, but 4 is just it means that it's not a very gradual increase in ability. It means that when you upgrade even a single level, suddenly you can do this thing and it's almost a little jarring, and sometimes it's more than you really wanted to at that point, or you feel like, well, I mean, if it's gonna be, I don't need it that much, and if it's gonna be that much, I don't need that for a long time, then I'd rather upgrade something else. But yeah, it makes a really big difference whether you're level 1 or level 2 on a skill, and it does make sense because level 1 is, as it's called, untrained. That means you don't actually know how to do that thing. Or you maybe know, like, the theory of it. You get that, well, okay, if I have to press let's say let's just go with, your use with pistols. Yeah, okay, I hold the gun like this, and I press the trigger, and the bullet comes out of that hole. Okay, but, level 2 is trained. That means you've now learned the basics of that skill. And, one of the abilities is swimming. And think about how well a person can swim who hasn't tried it versus one who has some experience or knowledge of it. Now, The different skills are weapons heavy, weapons pistol, weapons rifle, weapons low-tech, weapons demolition, environmental training, lockpicking, electronics, medicine, computer, and swimming. And the difference between electronics and computers for hacking, electronics is for the multi-tool use. And a lot of people say that swimming and environmental training are useless. For some paths, sure, but swimming can really get you cool stuff. And if you don't upgrade the swimming skill, use the augmentation, or save the rebreathers, of which there are not enough to cover all the different swimming areas, you drown fast. There's an O2 meter close to the health meter, and it refills immediately when you re-emerge. And you can slow down at lowering, but it'll lower when you're submerged, except when you're using a rebreather, which has its own meter for how long you can use it. And the moment it's reached the bottom, you die fast. And early on, that happens quickly, and there are really useful things to dive for. Again, mission 1, And leaving water by jumping a ladder or such is Grand Theft Auto 3 boat leaving awkward. They made it work, sure, but it kind of teleports you a little, and in this, it lets you jump higher than normal so that you can get far enough up. This can also lead to making noise when you didn't mean to. If you play stealthily, most of your jumps are careful to not be too loud. The Thief/System 2 vaulting would have worked really well here. And getting off a ladder at the top can have this effect too, because first-person shooter ladders that you only touch rather than use suck. When you emerge from water or the like, climb to the top of something, a periscope would have been amazing. And Thief 2 at least had the camera balls, and those are a little difficult to use in that exact situation, but they're there, and there's no reason why. I mean, you literally can have, there's an augmentation that lets you see through walls, so why not something, it would be fine if it was an augmentation, but just something that would let you peek just a little bit up, because the moment that you're far enough up to see, you're far enough up to be seen. Now, let's see. Hacking has a bar for how long you can be in the system, which, with a slower decrease the higher skill level, how long into its decrease you actually have access, and how long the cooldown, only for that specific computer, but often there aren't many computers in a mission area. And if you hack for too long, your augmentation power supply will be instantly drained since it's connected in order to hack. And if you're in a base, it'll set off the alarm, and thus any nearby electronic arm thing will attack, and any other sentient enemy will attack as well. And hacking does not pause the game. Hacking in front of others will be noticed, other than ATMs, and some allies will comment, same for reading books and such, and for hacking some may even attack you. Oddly, sometimes they'll ask what you're doing when you're reading a book, and yet you can hack right in front of them and they won't bat an eye. And other times they can clearly tell you're doing something with the computer they don't want you to. And sometimes allies freak out if you attack something, even if it's a box and you're getting the equipment inside. Thankfully they rarely attack you over this, but it's still weird. And if you're in an area or using something they don't want you to, short of drawing a weapon and or attacking someone, they mostly won't attack. And hacking has a few shortcut keys, which is really helpful for when you don't have the ability, the skill very highly upgraded. Now, when you point to something you can affect, it'll tell you how many lockpicks, multi-tools, or how blow-upable it is. And sometimes it'll only be one of these, sometimes two. I'm not sure it's ever all three, but, and make sure not to move when you lockpick or multi-tool, because it doesn't lock and it will stop picking or tooling if it isn't focused enough, which is super annoying in the thankfully few places where you're swimming at the same time. But holding down can crouch, at least if it's not too high on the wall. And some doors can't be opened without the key and may remain locked to you for a while, and it might be really compelling and impactful when it is later opened, and or a safe area becomes a battlefield. Like love. Now, some have said that, it's annoying that you just press hack or, the like. That, they're not hacking, and multi-tooling and lock picking are not mini games or puzzles. They could have been. This choice has never bothered me personally, and there are so many that it would get incredibly tedious. This is not like a Splinter Cell game. There can be a ton of security ones in a short space of time. And, when you log in regularly, you do type in login information, and they do tend to balance it between not too easy to figure out for, strangers, and not too hard to remember between reading them and inputting them. Would it have sucked to have the code appear on screen in a small window when you're at the computer? Perhaps the player should have to know when he can bring it up. I think that might not have sucked. And once you're in a security system, you get to turn individual security elements on and off, set turrets against your enemies, or everyone, or simply turn them off. I really wish you could press a button for the setting you wanted to. As it is, you have to cycle. And the 4 settings are allies, and this is to you, so allies, your allies, enemies, your enemies, everyone, or bypassed. And if you scroll through it in a fraction of a second, it just exactly won't fire a single bullet in anything within range. If you don't get in time, it will fire at least 1 bullet, which will sound the alarm, which sucks if that wasn't what you wanted to happen. If you're just trying to turn it off, you have to be careful that, both enemies and everyone will have it firing on your enemies, and everyone, or what was it, it will fire on things that aren't. Yeah, I don't know for sure if it like fires. I didn't really try it when there were like NPCs or neutrals around. Freaking neutrals never know where they stand. But yeah, and I just make it like a drop down, or have like the different options next to it or something. Anyway, there's freedom and active interaction there. And you can turn cameras off, you can pan or zoom them yourself for recon purposes. Change the speed at which they pan or zoom, but only for your use. And they don't zoom unless you're having it. Yeah. And yeah, you don't get skill points for killing, cracking computers, or stealth actions the way you do in Splinter Cell Blacklist, which in that game trains you to do those things. Instead you get them at specific points, and sometimes it's really weird why you're getting it, how much you're getting it, and yeah. And you cannot upgrade how much you can hold. You just have full use of the inventory right from the start. Cybermercs, you can upgrade your weight and carry capacity. System Shock 2, you can upgrade to unlock additional slots, and this has nothing like those. And I do feel like that's a wasted opportunity. And again, Cybermercs and System Shock 2 both came out before this. Now, there are 10 quick use slots activated by the numbers 1 to 0. You can scroll back and forth between them with the mouse wheel. Slot 10 is locked to the nano keyring by default, and yeah, since it's nano, it literally, if you have the nano key for the door, then you just bring out the nano keyring, and it has the one actual physical thing, and you put it into the lock, and yeah, it makes, you don't see this, but that must be how it works, that it forms the specific key for that specific lock, and that's a really cool idea. Makes a ton of sense for something like this, where someone would be running around with a dozen, you care. I didn't note the number, but I maybe shouldn't say, but there are a ton of keys in this, and you never have to bring up the specific one, you just bring out the key ring. Now you can, and it'll automatically pick the right one if you have the right one. You can drag and drop to and from the 10 slots whenever you open the inventory. Unlike Cybermercs, what you carry takes up space in the inventory even if it's in a slot. and you cannot carry two of the same weapon. Any enemy you come across who has that weapon, you won't pick it up when you search him, and you also won't be told that he had it, but sometimes it's pretty obvious. If he shot at you with it, you know that he had it. Moving items in the inventory basically means tossing one thing, then moving things into its place. You can't drag a thing on top of another for the two to swap places, or for you to pick up the second in place of the first, a la Cybermarks and System Shock 2. And be careful to try, because some items combine, and there's, again, thankfully, no one doing that. You can buy food and drinks in some bars and such, but you'll pretty frequently find all that you need. I don't think I've ever needed to buy food for the purposes of healing myself. Sometimes other characters will want you to, buy things for them. You can carry 50 flares total, and yeah, that certainly is more useful than the flare darts, as far as I've seen. But there's a max carry capacity of 10 for a lot of foodstuffs, sodas, 40s. There's one point that needs me to buy a guy a beer, which means I need to drop all 10, then pick them up after giving the guy the newly purchased ones. Why not just have the purchased ones be unique items instead, or automatically have me drop one of the previous ones and then the one I just bought be the one that I give the guy. Yeah. And when I have full carry capacity and I R&B use one, why doesn't it just use one I have and then pick up the new one? Me doing that is only a few clicks away, so they might as well have made that a little faster. And they're, I think cigarette packs are also 10 max. I'm not sure they have much use. I think I saw someone say that if you blow the smoke, which you automatically do, when you use cigarettes, it blows a puff of smoke out. And you hear them, like, cough. I want to say also it's been a while since I tested it, but it'll like disrupt the lasers, which is really cool. But other than that, they take 10 hit points from your torso, and you only have 100 hit points for it. So I guess in the future, in 2052, smoking 10 packs of cigarettes within a short space of time will kill you dead on the spot if you don't have any beer or soda. Yeah. But yeah, to be fair, I mean, you apparently smoke the whole pack in like a second, which, I mean, for like a soda can, okay, I could see that, just quaffing it just like that. But and a bottle of wine or beer also makes your vision blurry, which it'll do if you drink a whole one in a single. Anyway, yeah, for that it basically makes sense. But yeah, cigarettes, sodas, and such, and the other things I mentioned stack, which is very useful for carrying more. And food can sometimes be given to homeless or and the like, and they may give you information in return. You can also carry drugs and take drugs if you want. Now, ammo does not take up any space, which means you can pick up a cool gun that you find on a mission, use it just briefly, and then throw it away. In System Shock 2 and Cybermarks, you'd have to spend space, and in the latter case, weight, capacity on the ammo. Excuse me. That does mean that the gun won't be as useful if you haven't upgraded the skill, but, yeah, some of them, like in one of the earliest missions, I found a rocket launcher, and I had by then gotten 20 rockets, which is the max, I'm pretty sure, max carry capacity, which I could then choose. I didn't. But yeah, I could then have run around blowing a bunch of stuff up, then thrown away the gun, and picked up what I dropped to pick it up. And yeah, that just, which is also, there's no such thing as unlocking the ability to use a gun in this, which there is in System Shock 2. In System Shock 2, you can start System Shock 2 with a grenade launcher if you want to. If you play as the Marine, and I think there might also have to be, I forget if you also have to pick certain upgrades for him, but yeah, you'll start the game with a grenade launcher. That doesn't mean you can just immediately, you can't use a grenade launcher if you just, if you don't unlock the ability for that, which, Yeah, actually, that might be the thing. If you get the 1 point in heavy, then you start out with a grenade launcher, which I think you can then use. But that means there are other important skills that you don't have there right at the start. And you can go through all of System Shock 2 never using grenade launcher. It's just extremely useful. You'll have a much harder time without the grenade launcher, but if you want to, you can. Now, yeah, you know, I do think it would have been a cool limitation if you can only carry ammo for weapons you are carrying or the like. But ammo does all have max carry capacities, and it'll say, you have enough of that kind of ammo. I beg to differ. Why not just have it say you cannot carry any more of that kind of ammo? It does for other carry capacity limits. Why not just drop at my feet when someone tries to give me something that I can't carry? It does that at least once in the game, so you know they knew how to. Instead, you know, your character will say, hold on, I can't carry it right now, and you'll have to throw stuff away in order to, you know, and then talk to him again, and it'll be a much shorter conversation. But nevertheless, why not just have... Yeah, there's no good reason. Anyway, if you have full ammo, when you first check a body, you'll never be able to get any ammo off it, which is really annoying. It does encourage spending lots of ammo in areas where that kind of ammo is used by enemies. And items that restore ammo do stay where you find them until you pick them up or leave the area. There's this one gun, which is the PS-20, which is a plasma gun, which has only one round in it, and then you literally see him tossing it away because it won't be useful ever again. And you can actually only ever carry one of those at a time. So, you know, like the other weapons, you can only carry one of it, but it's also the only weapon that only has... No, it isn't. Is one of the only weapons. There's also one-use rocket launchers. And explosive crates can be moved and detonated. Throwing one into the air will detonate it when it lands, because it lands that hard. And at the start, if you toss it in the air and stand there, that will kill you. You can throw it down from above enemies. They can be very effective against bots. You can also place them in the path of bots, then detonate them with a bullet from afar. They can be used to blow open doors to items to save you lockpicks. And you can thankfully carry the smaller ones through vents, shafts, and tunnels, up and down ladders. Same for bodies. It can sometimes be difficult to set out gentle-like, though crouching and or aiming more or less directly down to the ground can help. So often you end up carrying it the whole way, then throwing it and running for cover. Saves you a bullet too. You can bring explosive crates one at a time on the subway from one area to another. Turns out I wasn't the worst person on that train. But literally, there's this one part of the game, in an area you'll go to more than once, where you can take the subway between two different parts of New York. And one of those parts has explosive crates, and yes, if you pick up a crate, then take the train, you'll still be carrying the crate when you leave the train on the other part. Yeah. Now, yeah, this one person points out the inventory system isn't as annoying as many other people think, but the game should have automatically moved the items out of the way if you had enough room anyhow. Definitely. And skill advancement is based on exploration and objective completion rather than usage, meaning you could swim around in a sunken freighter somewhere and suddenly be an expert sniper, which I thought was strange. True, but it eliminates the need for grinding. You know, as you point out, you can suddenly be amazing at a thing you haven't done at any point before that, so you don't have to suffer through, ugh, I'm bad at this, but the game will let me be better down the line. And as for the how and why, well, you have cybernetic implants. You're basically programming your mind and body to be good at something. Thus, it doesn't need time. It's just you putting in the program where before there wasn't a program for that, or rather the previous program wasn't as good. It's a whole new version, not a minor update. And I do think, if it's that or like grinding. I mean, I don't know. I like both, and I think that it was a good choice in this. I would really hate to have to run around constantly using the gun early on when I'm bad at it, instead of just being able to hold off on using it much at all until I'm really good at it already. Now, you can edit notes you've gotten, delete any notes, add your own notes, including to any of the relatively few images you're given over the course of the game, anywhere on the image, MS Paint style. Skills and augmentations don't give you numbers for upgrading except for cost. You have to just try upgrading something, then using the skill or augmentation to see if you think it's worth it, or look it up online. And there's no good reason why it can't tell you beforehand. It's not like it remains a secret, and it would help you choose. Augmentations. Now, the ability to run faster makes your jumps higher and lets you fall from farther up. But when activated, you run specifically at the highest speed it's upgraded to. I wish you could adjust it, since sometimes you want to jump but not run that far or such. And really, I mean, when you don't use the ability, you can choose, there's the toggle key for run or walk. And yeah, I feel like, just again, actually, yeah, why not? I'm almost certain that this isn't the case, at least. Why not, if I activate the ability but then toggle run walk, then I'll walk normally but be able to jump really high up, and and be fine to fall from farther up. Hypothetically, let's say I'm here and I want to get to here, and there's a hole, or rather, I could jump to here if I wanted to. There's a hole in between. What I want is to jump down the hole but not land too hard. If I put on the ability and then run, I might almost actually make it over here rather than fall in the hole, or I might make it so close that it causes some kind of problem. Maybe I land closer to this end than I meant to. Maybe I just wanted to walk off and land directly, and yeah, because it's, yeah. Now, if, invisibility to bots only works if they don't already know you're there. Then they will be able to hit you, which does make sense. It's not like you disappear. You're just invisible or harder to see, and the bot can deduce where you are if you don't move too much. And invisibility doesn't get better with upgrades, it gets less expensive, starting out very expensive, which, again, I appreciate, because that means that you're not waiting until invisibility gets good before you use it. Because when you just get invisibility as an ability in a game, and it's on a low level, then you're like, oh, I mean, it's not that useful yet, so you barely use it. Where in this, I mean, you might still barely use it at first, but it's more of a thing of, okay, now I really need it, so now I'm going to use it for a little bit, rather than, well, now I really need it, so I'm definitely not going to use it because they'll still see me, so I have to find another way. And yeah, the challenges of getting augmentations. You have to search for the augmentation canisters. You then have to carry them in your inventory. They thankfully only take up a single slot. Carry them until you get to a medbot, and only then can you install one of its augmentations, and each canister is specific to one of these 6 body parts. Now, on the other hand, to upgrade, you just have to find an upgrade canister. You can use them when you pick them up instead of having to find a medbot first. And the in-game explanation for this is, it already knows, bless you, it already knows, I don't know if the camera picked up that, but that was a loud sneeze, so it's okay. The upgrade canister, if you already have, like, because you can upgrade an ability that you haven't already installed, so it's basically just, you need a medbot to properly install an augmentation canister. It's such a specific canister that it can only be used for one of these 6 different slots. Yeah, you don't want just some, butterfingers, I dropped the file, to deal with that. You want a robot that's specifically built for that, but upgrading it already knows the thing that, it has installed the overall thing, it's just upgrading it. Now, if your legs get hurt badly, you crawl, and not unlike white men, can't jump. Arms, you shoot poorly. Torso or head, you die. And when you heal, you can tell it to heal a specific part of your body, heal all, or just use a medkit from the inventory menu. And if you just choose to use it from the inventory menu, let's hypothetically say that the medkit heals 25 points, and your head has lost 15 points of health, your arm has lost 10 points. If you press to heal specifically your head, in that menu, it'll only heal your head, it won't also heal your arm. But if you press heal all, it'll use one and heal both of those. But if you had more to heal and you didn't want to spend a medkit on that, it'll use medkits on that still. Whereas if you go into the menu and just choose the medkit and press use, then it will heal, it'll divide it up between the different body parts. And none of these options give complete control, which I feel like you should have. It's, simply have a heal all option with how many kits you want to use or something. Now, the augmentations are all, by default linked to the F keys, and you have 10 abilities, but there are 12 of those keys. That's because F1 opens your inventory menu and F2 opens your goals menu. So it's F3 through F12, and F12 is specifically for the flashlight. If you find this inconvenient, you can easily reset each of them to another key. Of course, doing this is slightly awkward, and it's not necessarily the most intuitive. Basically, it is by definition bound to, for example, the flashlight is bound to F12. However, you can go into the controls menu and rebind F12 to another key. I put it on the F key for flashlight, pretty standard FPS thing. That's a little awkward, but once you realize that that's how it works, yeah, it's entirely clear which F key is for which augmentation. Just open the augmentations menu, and you can also see it's part of the HUD. Now, and someone point out, some of the augmentations could easily have been, something like strength could easily have been made a passive ability and just maybe drain, energy as you're using that. But everything you did was a drain on your resources, which demanded continuous on-off switching. You feel like a beginning piano player. It broke the immersion for me many times. A modern weapon wheel setup for it would help a ton. Where you bring up the wheel and you point in one of the directions to choose one. That would have been amazing. And maybe the ability to combine a few, such as activating healing automatically when you activate something that helps you take less damage from a certain type of, damage. And yeah, I'll get to that one later. But yeah, and really, given that I have an ability an augmentation that literally lets me decrease how much energy the other augmentations drain, isn't it kind of logical to just start that augmentation up when I start another augmentation? Now, a few minutes in, let me draw you a picture. I feel like using melee instead of guns, so I activate one augmentation that makes my melee attacks hit harder. I'm going up against gunmen, so I activate a second that shields me better from bullets. I know he's going to try to outrun me as he shoots, so I activate a third that lets me run faster. He's got powerful weapons, so I activate a fourth that regenerates my health. And if there's at least one enemy that uses tranq darts, I activate the fifth augmentation that makes hazardous substances hurt me less. And if someone had a rocket, but at that point in the game that wasn't all that common, I'd activate the final augmentation that I've added myself in addition to the flashlight, blowing up rockets before they get too close. And the health regeneration one automatically turns off when you reach full health, unlike any of the others that only turn off automatically when you run out of bioenergy. There is also a key that specifically turns off every single one of them, which I'm glad they did. But yeah, I wish I could set it to automatically turn on whenever I start to lose health as well, similar to how Nocturne allows you to auto-heal once your health reaches 0. And, you know, I suppose I shouldn't give away how far into the game, but a little bit into the game. A ways into the game. I have all augmentations and have been able to upgrade at least one level of any skill. Obviously not all of them, or even more than a few. Boring, nothing to look forward to? Disagreed. I still get to upgrade them, and now I have a ton of time left to use them, and use them in conjunction with each other. And I don't think that it's especially a problem in the Jedi Knight games, or at least I don't recall it as being a problem. But, you know, hypothetically, it could be a problem if you only get certain abilities very late in the game. And yeah, that's the thing in, let's see, what's that game where the System Shock 2, actually, the very last gun you get, it's like, oh, this I mean, this would have been a really good gun if I had gotten it a little while ago. Now it's not that much better than these other ones, and I barely have any time left to use it. And yeah, that's not the case with any augmentation here, or really any weapon. The last time you get a new weapon that you've never seen before is still a bit away from the end of the game. There's nothing in this game that only shows up at the very end, really. Maybe some of the really big robots. Actually, yeah, to be fair, some of that, but it's not right at the very end. Now, you know, there's an augmentation that increases the effectiveness of the others. Healing at level 2 is 15 per, I think it's every few seconds or so. With the use of the other augmentation, it can go to 25. And every augmentation is useful at least somewhere and sometime. Just some are more rarely useful or not as useful when they are useful as others. But there is not a single augmentation in this, or a single skill, that is never ever useful. It's just the first time, you play the game, you don't know which are useful and which aren't as useful. I know that personally, I've enjoyed the spy drone, but I know others say that it's just completely useless. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely an acquired taste, and it's difficult to use. And again, I don't think it would have sucked to just have a brief, like, this is just some basic stuff you need to know. Because if you just learn how to use it by using it, then the first few times you're not going to be very good at it, and you're going to waste a lot of the energy of it to get to, yeah. Weapon modification. Now, you can, yeah, you can you find these one-use weapon modification boxes, which, you know, a lot of them can be used on a lot of different weapons. There are a few of them that can only really be used on one or two, but a lot of them can be applied to any, yeah. And there are, I don't know, I mean, not of any specific kind, but overall, probably a dozen, maybe 2 dozen, maybe even more than that. And yeah, which again really means you want to keep at least the weapons you upgrade in your inventory for the whole game. But yeah, you know, they can add a scope, a silencer, laser sights, and increase the weapon's range, accuracy, magazine size, decrease its recoil and reload time, and and something like recoil is only really for the assault rifle and the shotgun, and you can't put a scope on one of those. You can put a scope on the pistol, on one of the pistols, or the mini crossbow. And those can also get laser sights. Meanwhile, silencer, I'm not sure you can put a silencer on anything other than the assault rifle. Or can you put it on a regular pistol? You get a silenced pistol, so which is typically what I use once you get it, and that's early. And yeah, the weapons you use can be modified and leveled up, turning a standard issue pistol into an unstoppable killing tool. I like to turn mine into a mini sniper. It takes up way less space in your inventory, the ammo is far more plentiful, it can still be used in a firefight. Just attach a scope, a laser sight, a silencer, and improve its accuracy and range, and then it's extremely useful. And you find some of these modification boxes even in the first mission, as long as you look for them. Weapons. Deus Ex features 24 weapons, ranging from crowbars, electroshock weapons, riot baton, other melee, laser-guided anti-tank rockets, shotguns, both sawn-off and automatic, and assault rifles. Both lethal and non-lethal weapons are available, and the player can also make use of several weapons of opportunity, such as fire extinguishers, which will temporarily, stun. They'll be staying there, not able to really attack, because they're, it distracts them enough. And big guns, such as the flamethrower, rocket launchers, big experimental plasma gun, will force you to walk slowly when you have it out, similar to other first-person shooters. And the law has one rocket, and then you throw it away like the plasma gun. And the regular rocket launcher, the GEP gun, will lock onto any mobile target, be it human or bot. It does so as you rest the crosshairs on them, same as normal. It won't do it on static, such as turrets and cameras, which you can destroy with rockets. And you reload it for every rocket fired, and yeah, it can be a lot of fun to use, but again, you can't run around constantly using it in the game. Then there are throwable grenades that can be planted as proximity mines. Just hug the wall you want to place it on. They can't be placed on the ground itself. You can then shoot them from afar, thus letting you detonate them from much further away than if you threw it or used a regular remote detonator. And you can plant one on a wall over here, and then take minutes to get all the way up on a perch, all the way over here, and then wait for an enemy to get close, or maybe you using it to distract or something. But if you went all the way up here and tried to throw it, you wouldn't be able to throw it that far, and yeah. And it would be too far away to use a remote detonator properly. You can disarm the ones the enemy has planted, and these grenades come in a lot of varieties. You've got explosive, EMP, scramble, which flips any robot's allegiance, and yes, it does work both ways. I had to test it out. Tear gas, which also comes in a lot of barrels, same as regular explosives do. And you may have to walk through that yourself, but there's a skill, an augmentation, and an item that helps lessen the damage taken. And there's something else about that. One thing to note, if you place it, there's at least one place in the game where once you do a thing, it will activate security robots, and they'll come out of these small doors from these small rooms. And I knew that they would be activated, so I planted an explosive right outside the room, but the proximity detection thing, looked inside of the room, basically looked behind the door, and blew up. And of course didn't hurt the robot because there was a metal door between them. And yeah, just note that and be sure to place it in a slightly different place. Now, there are throwing knives, and you can pick up the ones that miss the target. There are swords, including a futuristic one that is unfortunately overpowered, but you can choose not to use it much. You're not forced to use it over and over. You know, various methods of stun, a stun gun, tranquilizer darts, which is the rare projectile weapon that you can fire underwater. Riot batons, tear gas, pepper spray. Pepper spray does no damage, but it keeps whoever is hit from attacking for a second or more, and you can spread it across several fast if they're close to each other, in which case you wouldn't just baton them. And the fire extinguisher works the same, but for longer, and each fire extinguisher is one use. It'll use up all of it when you activate it, and like System Shock 2, the weapon animations are very basic, when first-person shooters, including around this time, were cool and could be very elaborate. FPS elements. Actually, never mind on that. Stealth. Now, thief-style, commandos-like, even the non-lethal aspect, stealth. You can ghost, but it's very difficult, more so than, say, thief. Personally, I found, I started out kind of wanting to, but then I decided, no, I'm not going to be that specific about it. I'm going to accept that I'm not going to be able to do it quite like that. Sound travels and enlight your scene faster, though not as accurately and dependably as thief, which is part of the frustration with trying to ghost. On easier difficulty settings, it's less of a problem. And, picking up and throwing, a small item caused sound distraction, literally. And this is, again, where, moving stuff around the inventory can get annoying. If you drop an item to make room for something, if you, again, if you crouch and aim down, maybe it won't make a noise, but otherwise it will. Even just dropping a pack of cigarettes can attract attention. Now, you can knock enemies out at a distance with, gas grenades. Well, actually, does the gas work like that? I just realized I don't think I actually ended up using it. I might be thinking of Blacklist now. Anyway, but yeah, with silent crossbow bolts, tranquilizer for non-lethal, or just regular darts if that's what you want to use. And the AI will say something if they think they saw something, if they're certain they saw someone, or if they've accepted that there was no one there. And if they can't find but still know that an enemy of theirs is around. And it can be easier to kill an enemy with a melee weapon than to knock him out with a melee weapon, but killing him like that produces a death scream, which alerts anyone nearby to your murderous presence. A neutral sound produced by throwing something comparatively will only make them slightly alert. And yeah, and up close you use the stun prod and or a baton, and the baton is what I found most dependable of like ones that aren't the arrows from the crossbow that knock out can take a while before they work, and the stun prod uses ammunition, which can be really rare. The baton doesn't use ammunition, and when it works, it can actually do it in just a few hits, and few enough hits that the enemy doesn't alert anyone else. But yeah, if you don't want to sneak up behind as many enemies as possible, you may not want to play this as stealth. But you can play it violently throughout. But yeah, the stun prod requires ammo and only has 4 zaps per clip, which can't be upgraded. If you're not seeing, one zap may knock someone out. If not, it may take two. But the first will stun them for a few seconds, giving you time to zap another, and then you can baton both knocked out. And you can also zap one and then use something else on the next, but that will give the second person a second to attack while you pull out another weapon. The baton can knock out with two, or sometimes just one, to the back of the head. If you haven't noticed already, more if you were. And again, there are skills and augmentations to increase this, to make you better at this. And he'll be stun locked for a few seconds, maybe only two, from the first hit. And that means even though he'll yell and soon be ready to attack, you can hit him the second time before he has time to. And the yell doesn't go many meters on lower difficulties. You also won't be seen from many meters in dark levels if you're quiet. Of course, when they're moving, you have to walk, not run, so it can be difficult to get close enough before they notice you to hit them in the head. And at the end of mission 1, you get an augmentation canister letting you unlock the skill that makes melee attacks more powerful, making this easier. And sometimes enemies that stand together will check out sounds together, and this doesn't mean you can't use luring them away, but they might go together to check out. Yeah. And enemies do see the light augmentation. It does work as an actual flashlight. It can be used underwater, but not all your bullet-firing guns can. And if you save your game while crouched, loading may make you stand up, possibly out of cover, which is annoying. While crouch walking and walking, which is fast rather than running, sorry, are both silent, unlike Thief, crouch walking is faster than walking, and since you in both have to be standing to effectively knock someone out from behind, it makes sense to close the distance walking rather than crouch walking. Thus, it's a little awkward here. I mean, yeah, to briefly paint you a picture, he's slowly walking away from you here, and you have to keep up with him. Whatever. You have to keep up with someone who's walking away, and if you're standing up, then the walking is not going to be as fast as his walking, but crouching is going to be. But then the moment you're close enough, you need to stand up and then knock him out. So yeah, that's, again, it's not the end of the world. You can it's something you get used to, basically. Now, when you hide in a place the enemy can't find you, they will, in seconds, accept that you're gone. They will, however, be more alert than they were before they realized you were in the area at all. Not quite to the same extent as Thief, but yeah. And robots, at least small ones, can't hear your footsteps even running, but they will hear explosions and see you from afar. And there are tiny and huge versions of a few types of robots and animals. In the case of animals, it's, obviously adult and young versions of the same animal. Controls. I'm just briefly going to say the game starts out with very, yeah, just to quote, the controls take literally a minute to change to modern FPS controls, so you can't really complain about them. Sound and music. I'm not going to get too much into it. I'm just going to say the main theme is incredibly catchy, and the music always tends to fit, and the music, will change in intensity whether you're in combat or have been detected or not. And yeah, briefly on design history. the various systems, elements, skills, abilities feel organic to the game, developed to work together. It doesn't feel like some of them were developed by different groups who were working independently from each other, sometimes to solve the same problem, and nothing feels like it belongs in a different game, which is like Bioshock Infinite. Engine. Now, this uses the Unreal 1 engine, and today it doesn't look as good, obviously, but again, with Deus Ex from Kenshi.net, it looks fairly good and runs pretty well. There are things about the game that are not as good. AI is part of it. The AI in the actual Unreal tournament from '99, the AI of the bots there is way better than the AI of groups in this. Graphics. Now, vehicles, commonly cars, are frequently found already wrecked. And these wrecks look terrible. They don't feel like they were ever an operational vehicle. They feel like awkwardly formed boxes that had textures printed onto them. Tons of first-person shooters have far more realistic-looking cars, including some from back when this came out. Now, the vehicles that are in one piece in this, they do tend to look a lot better, and other than the animation being kind of weightless, it does look okay. Now, let's see. AI enemies / enemies. Now, the AI is bad in a lot of places. They don't notice you when they should. Sometimes they notice you when they shouldn't. And as far as the challenge of them go, note that you have flamethrower enemies even in level 2, and they can kill you almost instantly, even late in the game. When you deal with a flamethrower enemy, basically, if you don't kill him immediately after he notices you, like immediately, like within a second, or you're too far away for him to hit or something other than that, he's gonna kill you. In most situations, yeah. This one guy asks, why are ventilation systems big enough to fit a human? Because it's an American piece of action fiction. And there's this is a really great quote, and this guy did give it a 10 out of 10. The AI scripting is more or less the 3D version of Space Invaders, all guns blazing and weave as you charge. It's really silly looking, and that just, I played Unreal Tournament '99 a ton back when it was new, and the bots are very, very good at I mean, you can play, there are objective modes in that, and yeah, they will present a significant challenge. Now, the AI will run awkwardly, not just enemies. If you're in an area that has civilians and or animals, they too will run in that Space Invaders style. It makes for a messy battlefield, and it would be great if civilians ran specifically towards safe areas, or you could maybe sneak up and tell them to carefully get to safety instead. They do kind of seek to get away from the battle, but this may take them to where the enemies go or already are. And sometimes you need to talk to that civilian, so you have to pursue them or wait for them to eventually walk back to the area. Once all the violence is complete, they will slowly start to walk back, but since the areas are so big, they will have gotten very far. And animals are easily spooked, and rats will often run right under your feet like this, especially in smaller and tighter areas, which is often where they're found, which is annoying if you're trying to play non-lethally. I mean, it won't show you stats of it like Thief, but still. Of course, in some areas you have cats and rats living together, mass hysteria. The wounded run from you and don't attack, which can get really annoying. And it can, and it can get to where a lot do this at once, and they run in different directions, and that's just really annoying. I don't, to be honest, I don't think that they meant for the enemies to run away when wounded. I think because it's hard to imagine that was what they wanted. I figure they probably just weren't able to stop that. And I mean, it makes sense as some like basic thing that an AI that is wounded will try to see what Half-Life, they'll do that. But in Half-Life, they don't run really far away and are really annoying. In Half-Life, basically, it means they'll stop attacking for a few seconds and they'll move a little slower, where in this, they'll actually move fast. Now, there's some really cool enemy designs, and like Thief 1, both big and small spiders, but here they're robots and a much bigger threat. Although the smaller ones are just annoying, mostly. There are a couple of times, not many, where the enemy can really only come from one or two directions at you, and may even come at you one at a time, and it means you can just camp. Just have them, the developers should have them either completely swarm you or not come right at you, but maybe throw explosives before you can see them from your camping site. Mostly alarm panels prevent this. Now, alarm panels can be bypassed with multi-tools or blown up, and obviously blowing them up attracts attention. If you're above an enemy who has a flamethrower and he can't see a way to attack you, he'll run in circles. This, instead of running to get a buddy who can attack you, sounding the alarm or the like. It's like if you're up on a ladder discovered by a non-ranged enemy in Thief. Now, unlike Thief, this doesn't happen very often. In Thief, if you want to troll, you can attract the attention of a sword-wielding enemy and just jump onto a ladder, and once you're he's just going to stand there. Now, sometimes if an enemy stands between you and another enemy, the other enemy will hit the one in between you, but this doesn't make the two of them attack each other. That requires scramble grenades or such. Some animals will attack anyone they encounter, regardless of which side they're on. Some enemies will eat bodies they find, even their fellow mates of the same race. Some may charge you, but if you run past a body of their mate, they'll stop to eat instead. I don't know, I guess they were just really hungry. And sometimes you can let them out of containment areas, and they'll and that's you can choose to just go move. If you want someone attacked near a containment area, you can go attack them yourself, or you can let these animals out. And if they get to be too much trouble for you, you can kill them. Some can swim, some can attack at a distance. Is it challenging? Now, this has 4 difficulty settings, each distinct from the others, and the game is challenging on the easiest difficulty. I have completed it on the highest difficulty at least once. If you're playing this for the first time, you may want to start on an easier, even the easiest difficulty setting. At least note that it's tougher than a lot of mainstream games today, and I don't say that to put them or today's gamers down. This is one of the games where when you die and tell it to load, it will indeed ask, "Are you sure you want to load?" As if that wouldn't be preferable to slow decomposition. There's this, it's amazing. I believe this was even like an actual critic who had like a publication he's writing for, and he this was back when it came out. He said, every time your character is killed and you start the game, you have to sit through a seemingly endless series of movies that re-establish the plot. It's called saving and loading, dude. And at least on easier difficulties, I'll admit, it's been a long time since I played this on a really hard difficulty. At least on easier difficulties, cameras have a max range and have to see you continuously for a few seconds before sounding the alarm. And actually, as such, if you've cleared the area of human enemies, you can run through their vision and they won't sound the alarm. And they also only care about seeing you, not bodies. And you know, the cameras in System Shock 2, you also have to be seen for a few seconds before they sound the alarm. But they're always much more, a much bigger threat than, where in this, sometimes they're not a huge threat. And yeah, I mean, comparatively, by the time I leave an area in System Shock 2, I'll probably destroy the camera. In this, I'll likely disable them with the hacking, but I mean, on previous playthroughs, I'm sure I destroyed cameras, but on this one I didn't at all, even the ones that I would then have to just run past or such. And cameras and turrets can barely be damaged at all, much less destroyed with small arms fire. And that's also something I really appreciate in this. Again, I mean, I love System Shock 2, but at the end of the day, if you have a big enough melee weapon, you can't just run up and just bash over and over on a robot and it'll eventually die. In this, good luck. It's also, in this one, it's almost impossible to actually avoid the attacks of a robot when it's actually, like, if you're avoiding the attacks of a robot, it's because you're so far away that you yourself can just barely attack it. Where, yeah, you know, in System Shock 2, you can, if you bounce around and strafe and such, you can avoid a lot of the attacks of the robot. Now, and some enemies can destroy you within seconds, some with a single hit. Some of them do have to be close to hit you, but then some of those move incredibly fast, even through water or the like. And when you face a large animal, or sometimes even a small one, with jaws, well, it can actually bite your head hard enough to kill you in one hit. And that, again, that's hugely different from a lot of games in this, you know, first-person shooter kind of, yeah. I haven't played mods for it. No, not a single one. You didn't expect this segment to be longer, did you? At least not if you picked this from the description box. Just see how little difference there is in the time code between this and the next one. And on that note, I haven't played multiplayer. Now, I don't think I ever have played multiplayer, and certainly haven't recently. I honestly don't think it's as interesting as single player. You know, this is again something where Blacklist, way more interesting in multiplayer. And, you know, co-op could be interesting, but yeah, I don't see multiplayer in this as interesting as single player. And I swear this isn't sour grapes. Yeah, to briefly read what others have written about it. You know, Deus Ex was designed as a single-player game, and the initial releases of the Windows and Macintosh versions of the game did not include multiplayer functionality. Support for multiplayer modes was later incorporated through patches. The component includes 3 game modes: Deathmatch, Basic Team Deathmatch, and Advanced Team Deathmatch. Only 5 maps based on the levels from the single-player portion of the game were included in the original multiplayer patch, but many user-created maps now exist. The PlayStation 2 release of Deus Ex does not offer a multiplayer mode. In April 2014, it was announced that GameSpy would cease their master server services, also affecting Deus Ex. Community-made patch for the multiplayer mode has been created as a response to this. The game didn't ship with multiplayer and it was tacked on in a later patch. Some enjoyed it, but I believe the general consensus was that it was completely awful and the game didn't lend itself to adversarial multiplayer at all. And yeah, I really think that's exactly. It's not at all that good, because you're not running around, you know, constantly like blowing things up and doing, it's not that kind of game, even. And I mean, when you do that a bunch, you don't tend to do that a ton without some part where you're then, exploring an area, which, I mean, that's not interesting if you're playing deathmatch, or like you're interacting with characters, which, again, adversarial multiplayer, no. Mission design. Now, the longest mission in the game to me took me 5 hours, almost 5.5 hours in total. So that gives you an idea of, it gets quite involved. Now, among the missions, secure the multi-level Statue of Liberty area, among other things, in New York, stop terrorists who've stolen ambrosia, infiltrate a warehouse and disable its generator, blow it up or shut it down via the computer, which you then have to find and safely access. And of course, blowing it up attracts attention. Secure an airfield. Scuttle a super freighter by blowing up several weak points and then fleeing it as it's exploding. Although, when that happens, it then says you now have 30 minutes to get out. And I was like, come on, couldn't you give me like 5 minutes or something? I really do think, but maybe that's a difficulty setting thing. But yeah, deal with the French terrorist group Silhouette in Paris near the Champs-Élysées, including its sewers. Resolve the war between the triads of Hong Kong. Stop a nuclear missile. I don't understand. I've actually read reviews where people say, oh, the missions in there are so boring. Okay, to each their own. There's a hostage, I already mentioned some hostage rescues. If you accidentally get the hostages killed, you can play on, but there are characters who will think less of you. There are a few escort missions, and yes, they're annoying, but they are thankfully rare. But yes, the AI is obnoxious for that. And ultimately, you do spend most of the game in the US, and since almost all of it is set in, under, or very near major cities, that means that you spend way too much time just in major US cities, and the most known ones at that, which is kind of bland considering the scope. But you do get to go to, various other, I already mentioned the various ones. But you don't spend as long in them as in the US. Level design. You almost never have a map, and it's always a static one. It may be a satellite photo. Now, some people talk about that you really have trouble finding your way. I cannot comment on that because I've played the game so many times that I know all the areas. Ultimately, I haven't spent, I suppose I have spent, I've spent more hours playing this than I have the first two Thief games individually, but when I play this and that, I replayed the Thief games, I don't know, a while ago, half a year maybe, in part to, it was an excuse maybe, but, to compare to Amnesia Machine for Pigs. But back then, I was like, wait, this is way bigger and more involved than I remember. Like, I think my brain, basically said, oh, you know what, actually, no, it's not that complex, because it's just way too, considering how little of a map you have and how many different paths that ultimately lead to the same place. It's maybe just, I don't think it's as, in the Thief games, it feels like this was designed by, either that this was just, sometimes you're in caves and such, or areas that were built at one point and then broke down, then other people came in and built at other points. You know, it feels like, okay, this has happened over a long time, and nobody can find their way down here anymore. Or it's something that's been built very carefully by people who had very careful, detailed maps, knew exactly where they were going. And in this game, it feels like, okay, these are areas that people actually move through. I mean, again, one of the first is the Statue of Liberty. This is a, you know, well, it used to be a tourist attraction. I'm not sure it's really a tourist attraction by the time of the game, considering there are turrets, robots, and well, the security cameras maybe, but turrets, I'm not sure tourists get that. Although, you know, we pledge to end tourism. Yeah, it feels like, okay, this is something that this is in several cases, this is someone's workplace. This is something that you can actually find your way through. And yeah, I mean, again, it's one playthrough of this took me almost twice as long as a single playthrough of either Thief 1 or Thief 2, and yet those games I have a harder time finding my way. If I didn't save constantly and like knock out everyone I came across when I played Thief, I would not be able to just, it would be way too open and involved. But yeah. But I will say, by using context clues, and you know, when you do have a satellite map, I mean, you can't say, okay, so this is north and the various, and you do always have a compass, you know, which is, I'm not sure you can even turn, well, actually, no, you can probably turn it off with one of the keys, but if you don't turn it off, it's always there. Now, yeah, you don't get lost in this game the way you get lost in the Thief games, even when you're careful to use the map. And yeah, the Thief games take me on about 30 hours each to complete, and I spend more of that time less certain about where I am and where I'm going than the time I spend on this. Dozens of different locations to visit, many of them famous or infamous. Some invisible borders, especially in water. Now, actually, that might be about it. Let's see. Move through a lot of venting ducts. And that's going to have to be it. I've reviewed other parts of this franchise, the links are in the description box. Please comment, thumbs up, and subscribe for more content.